should we be monitoring more pollutants? Which one would we use these data? Bob?
I think definitely some of the biological aerosols. You know, we've been very slow to recognize their potential importance, and they're very, very potent. I remember one MD, PhD pulmonary physician said one pollen grain in a sensitive enough asthmatic can trigger an attack. So I would propose the biological components as worthy of more measurement.
Okay, other commenters on this? I'm not sure we've satisfied the questioner. Melanie?
Yeah, I would just say that, you know, as time is moving forward, we are slowly looking at the individual components of particulate matter, and more of those types of studies are needed, and better measurements of those are needed.
And I would certainly add, from the perspective of the epidemiologists, there are few epidemiological studies that have the resources to establish their own monitoring network in any sort of population context. We rely on what is there. I think, you know, Roger and others have pointed out we study what we have at hand, because that's what we have at hand. You know, I guess the question of whether a group could sit back and say, you know, here's our best candidates for potential health risks, whether it's biological aerosols or something else, and this is what somebody should be thinking of. I know that, you know, I don't know how A or B feels about this, but certainly, you know, the states moan, I think, every time that, you know, the monitoring changes, because it involves money, and implementation of new monitoring networks is costly, of course. Yeah, Roger?
Well, I think that, you know, epidemiologists, scientists, we'd love more data. We'd love to have more specificity out there in terms of what's in the ambient environment, link that in terms of our health effect studies. But, you know, make a sort of state the obvious. A monitor has never protected anyone. So the public shouldn't be confused by putting more monitors out there that somehow we protect them. We may gather more scientific data, whatever. I think that there's some element of a need to step back and make a little more common sense approach in terms of, we've heard a comment from Tom, low-hanging fruit. I mean, I think all of us understand that, look to any of this data, we've got high emitters out there in the road. How do we deal with those? Well, that's a real tough political policy issue, because the American public, by and large, doesn't like regulation that comes down and impacts on them. They're quite happy in terms of impacting somebody else. But when you start talking about my vehicle might be there, well, that's a little different sort of thing. So I'm just saying, I think we need to be step back and be very cautious with regard to suggesting more monitors help us out some way in protecting public health. I don't think they do.
George?
Well, I would say the information that we gain allows more efficient public health decisions to be made, so that once the information is gathered, the monitor itself, if you don't use the data to learn more, then you're right. But if you take that data and that information and you learn more about what's causing the risks and what's not causing risks, then public policymakers can make better decisions to more efficiently and hopefully, you know, most at the lowest possible cost, get the maximum public health benefit. And along those lines, I think we're, you know, moving more towards, as we discussed, trying to look at things in a more holistic sense, and especially look at sources and the mix of pollutants coming from them. So separating that out is a challenge, and EPA is now setting a standard for roadside monitoring of NOx, nitrogen oxides, and that would be an opportunity to look at organics. And there are new methods out there. What we lack, you know, years ago we had a very good tracer for automobiles, at least, because we had lead in gasoline. That was not good that we had that, but it did allow us to focus in and target. We could say, okay, we see lead along a roadway, that's from automobiles. And then we implemented catalytic converters, and because the lead poisoned the catalytic converters, we took the lead out. it really didn't have so much to do with the fact that it was lowering IQs in children. It had to do with that we had the catalyst, and eventually we learned more about the effects of lead. So it's a good thing that we did that. So we don't have a marker for a very good single marker for automobiles versus diesel, but there are these new techniques out there looking at organics coming out of various sources and able to differentiate where the particles come from based on that. So we have trace elements from the network, the speciation network. What we don't have is any data along the lines of these, Jamie Shower, HEI has been very active in promoting research into this area. And so, right, Dan? And so those kind of data would be very effective in trying to discriminate out how much of the particles are from which sources. And especially, I think, this roadside monitoring that may result from, I guess it's a proposed standard at this point, NOx. It's final now? I should know that.
But a single-purpose monitor doesn't provide you much in the way of scientific information. If you learn nothing today, again, you can't go out and look at a single marker and somehow try to draw.
Well, that's what I'm. So you're agreeing with me? Because
no, I'm agreeing that it's worthless to put out NO2 monitors along roadways. If you're going to put out more monitors, you've got to be looking at the mix of what's there. Single-purpose, single-indicator monitors are not very useful.
Okay, but I think that's consistent with what I'm saying, that we have an opportunity to better characterize the emissions and the exposures along roadway by enhancing, not just doing the single pollutant, but by adding in organics. Now, if you're going to promote adding in other pollutants as well, but that's, if you want to propose that. But I think the most cost-effective, if I had to target in on one thing that I would add, it would be these organic compounds, so that we can better, because each source has its own fingerprint, organic fingerprint. It's a little variable, but the sources are different in that, and that could very well be a way to get to the next level.
I knew the person who submitted this question was trying to stir up trouble. Let's see, Mike.
Well, I think, these are valid points, but what we do need a lot more of is not necessarily measuring many more pollutants. We need to decide on what are reasonable markers and then measure them at many more locations than what we do routinely. And New York City has just set up a very interesting program where they're measuring in over 100 neighborhoods. They've come up and found something that nobody expected. It's buildings with oil, class level 4 oil in their boilers that have some of the highest particulate levels in any of the neighborhoods in New York. So that's a system that's going to cost money, but when we look at the societal investment that we have to make in diesel regulations or any of the other ancillary costs that come along with trying to protect public health, the investment in getting better information to inform the science is relatively trivial.
I think this discussion is useful largely for pointing out that it would be useful to have questions that you want to answer in implementing whatever additional monitoring is being done, and going beyond that to making decisions about what you might do for targeted at particular sources or particular classes of compounds is, I think, a lot of work. I'm going to move us on and